Okay? So, Shemot. Shemot is the Hebrew word for the name of the book of Exodus. The importance of this name is lost in translation to the Western mindset. Just as the name Brashit becomes of little importance to the Christian indoctrinated in the form of Old and New Testament biblical teaching. If we look at the names of the 5 books of Moses as they are interpreted in English, we'll read them this way. In the beginning are the names of the children of Israel that entered Egypt with Jacob. And the Lord called, and I put in there to Moses, in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, These be the words which Moses will speak unto all Israel on this side of Jordan. And then it tells us in Deuteronomy 1:5 that then began Moses to declare this law. So in short, when we study the book, and I say the book of Torah, we study in the 5 books of Moses. And in the names of the books is the significance of how they come to the term law. Let's go to Deuteronomy for a second. Deuteronomy chapter 1. Because if you've been following Deuteronomy, Devarim is the last book of the Torah, and it begins to explain to us. And it says, Deuteronomy, Devarim, these be the words which Moses spoke to all Israel on this side of Jordan in the wilderness, in the plain over against the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan, and Hazeroth and Dishavah. It says, there are 11 days' journey from Oreb by way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel, according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment unto them. Of course, and it says, after he had slain Sihon and king of Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, which dwelt in Ashtaroth in Adari. And then it says in 5, on this side of Jordan, in the land of Moab, began Moses to declare this law, saying, so, it gives us a description of the historical record from Genesis 1 all the way up to Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy, you're seeing exactly how it was now going to be given to Moses. And Moses had received all this instruction through in his journey. He learned it. Now, he is beginning to declare, and this is where most people get the foundational belief that the Torah is the law. Because right here it says, and Moses began to declare this law. So they shorten it and they say, well, the Torah means the law. See, which is not accurate. Okay? But it begins this way. And what Moses is going to start talking about now is he's going to start reminding the people throughout the book of Deuteronomy everything that they've been through and lived through and learned beginning from Genesis. So he will go back through all of this. Now, the purpose for this is there is a specific purpose, and a specific purpose for the names of the books in the Holy Torah. Every name, every book has a name. And the name identifies the purpose of the book and the purpose for its believer. If you read the text and you read the books, then you believe what's there, there's a purpose for you. Okay? And this is how we are developed into faithful, truthful people. If you believe what is written, that's why Christ, he didn't rebuke the devil with anything else other than what? It is written. And then he finally corrected him and told him, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. That was one warning he gave. And that's the last the devil needed, because he left him from that point forth. See? Now, there is a specific purpose in naming the books of the Holy Torah. There is a name attached to every book. For instance, the words here in Deuteronomy. The name of the book of Deuteronomy in Hebrew is Devarim, which means the words. The words. And the importance of how the Torah is written is identified by how you read it, because you can read it frontward to backwards and backwards to forward, and you're going to get a very specific meaning. For instance, you have the names right there in front of you. We're going to read backwards to forwards. Meaning what? Right. Left to right. All right. First book you're going to read is what? Genesis. What's the name of the book of Genesis? In the beginning. The very first book. In the beginning are the names the Lord called in the wilderness the words. Read it backwards. The words in the wilderness the Lord called the names in the beginning. What does that mean? That the Word was with God when? And that was His name. How do we know that? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How is He going to return? The same way He was in the beginning. How do we know that? Revelation. How is He going to return? There's no mystery. Revelation 19, verse 13. It says to us, and I'm going to read from verse 11. It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. He that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. He was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called what? The Word of God. There is a purpose for this. If you want to confuse it, change the names around. The only one's going to get confused is you. Because this is what God gave. And this is what Christ used to open up the understanding of His apostles. So, now, it's amazing how the faithful, so-called faithful of God, will take the first 5 books of Moses and say, well, the Torah is not really important. The law is not really important. But the secular world looks at the Torah and they are amazed. They are amazed at the chronology, the historical record that is contained here. They actually use the Torah, the 5 books, as an instrument for archaeological science. They use it. They use the scriptures as a record of the events in the historical events in the world. They found lost civilizations. The Sumerian text was discovered because somebody believed the scriptures. Did y'all realize that the Sphinx was discovered because somebody was looking for what the scriptures call the city of Ramesses? They were looking for these things. They wanted to see where were they. Realize they're still trying to find the Tower of Babel? And Nineveh was found. Babylon was found. All these came right out of the scriptures. The secular world embraces the Torah, and the people of faith reject it. That just confuses me. Why? So, what does this have to do with Exodus and the names? Well, the names of the children of Israel are not just names of tribes based on the names of the sons of Jacob. The name Israel has a much greater meaning than has ever been taught. Many teach Israel exists from the time that the angel wrestled with Jacob, and that's when the name of Israel first appears. The name of Israel appeared before that, but it was in the form called Eshuran. And since when does Eshuran come up? Before we get to that, let's go. So in Genesis chapter 32, verse 26, the angel wrestles with Jacob. How do we know it's an angel? The text says it was a man. Jacob wrestled with a man. Right? Genesis 32, verse 26. What does it say? The name, and he told him, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. Why? It says, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Here's something that I ask everybody. Okay. If it was an angel, how did he bless? Don't have the power to bless. They're servants. Okay? But more importantly, he says to Jacob, for as a prince hast thou power with God. Prince of whom? How was he a prince? Who was his father? Who was the king? How does he now become a prince? Or does he have power as a prince with God and with men? Who has blessed Jacob with that name? When just Jacob wrestled with a man in Hosea 32:24, he wrestled, many said he wrestled with himself. No, he wrestled with a man. This is what Genesis says. In Hosea chapter 12, verse 4, it says it was an angel that wrestled with him, which is correct. Notice the blessing. Notice how he says, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Did he wrestle with a man or with an angel? He wrestled with a man as he would wrestle with an angel. Okay? As he would wrestle with an angel. How does one wrestle with an angel? How does one wrestle with an angel? And how does one have power with God when it comes to angels? By how you speak. That's how you wrestle with angels. How did Christ wrestle with the angel in the wilderness? The devil is an angel. Remember that. How did he wrestle with him? By how he spoke. See? So here it is. But this man blessed him. Why does the blessing include Jacob as a prince? Prince of whom? If we understand Genesis 48, 15 and 16 correctly, let's go to Genesis chapter 48. And let's read it together. Genesis 48. If we understand Genesis 48, 15 to 16 correctly, the blessing includes his name and the name of his fathers. Let's read it. And he blessed, this is Jacob blessing Joseph. He says, and he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham, Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, he says, bless the lads. Again, who is to bless the lads? Okay. It says, and let my name be on them. What is Jacob's name? Israel. And notice this, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Wait a minute. Here's a question. Ephraim and Manasseh are part of the tribes of Israel now. And they have one name. All the tribes all have one name. What's the name? So, what was the name of Abraham and Isaac? What was the name of them? They were also Israel. The name of Israel was also on them. So when he says, let my name be on them and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, he's telling us very simply here that the name of Israel exists here in his words, even on Abraham and Isaac. And there's a sign that it existed on them. He says in the next verse, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. The blessing upon Abraham was that he will be a great nation. He was blessed with that. What was the blessing on Isaac? The same blessing. What was the blessing on Jacob? What did Isaac bless Jacob with? With the same thing. So the blessing came from Abraham all the way up to Jacob. Now, Jacob is passing it on. Even on the children on Joseph and his children. So, in whose name did the sons of Joseph become part of a nation? And was it not Israel? Ephraim and Manasseh became part of Israel, that nation. That's the name of Jacob. That's the name that God had given his people. So, when we read in the book of Exodus 1 through 6, and we read that now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. And then it says to us, for Joseph was in Egypt already. When Joseph was in Egypt, he already had the name of Israel on him. That's why he mentions it. How many souls entered Egypt? How many souls were in Egypt? That's why there's in one part it says 70 souls entered, but then it says 75 souls. Because why? Joseph was in Egypt already. So why is it? So if Joseph was in Egypt already, and all the names of the children of Israel, all the names in Egypt, and it says, that's why it says, who came in with Jacob. Let's read Exodus 1, verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel. Statement. These are the names of the children of Israel. Okay? Which came into Egypt. Right? Every man and his household. Right? Came with Jacob. So, every man in his household came with Jacob. All of Israel came in. There were those who came in at the time, and there was one that was there already. He also is part of Jacob. But he already had the name Israel on him. He was already Israel. So, when it says this, people say, well, you're misquoting the scriptures. I'm not. I'm reading it the way it's written. Very simple. The children of Israel came into Egypt by their names. Why is this important? We're not focusing on the children of Jacob. We're focusing on the children of Israel. Why is this important? Verse 6, Exodus 1. And it says, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. Now, if they came in as the children of Israel attached to Jacob, then when that generation died, Israel should have died with it. Didn't die there. It continued. See? That's why it says the children of Israel apart from the children of Jacob. Israel will continue even though that generation will die. The next generation has the same name and continues. And it continues on until the eternity. It'll continue on until the end. Why is this important? Because when they leave Egypt, how are they going to go out? Are they going to go out as the children of Israel, or are they going to go out as the children of Jacob? How did they come in? How will they go out? They'll go out as the children of Israel. Why? How long were they there? 430 years. 30 years of peace and 400 years of servitude. But yet they come out children of Israel. Why? By their names. Why is this important? How are we going to leave this planet? Are we going to leave it in the name of the church? Or are we going to leave it as Israel? So what are you seeing before you, brethren? This is a blueprint for your lives. Everything that Israel will go through, you are going to go through. Understand this. Everything that Israel will learn, you're going to learn. Everything that will become a sign upon Israel will be on the last generation of Israel. That's why you have so much symbolism here. This is why they're attacked and made to serve the king of Pharaoh in a certain manner. Now, in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22 to 26, the Lord tells Moses, he must say to Pharaoh, it says, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. I want to include this in this point right here, so we'll have a clear understanding of how the Lord will form his Israel. How did he form it before? How many are you familiar with the circumcision and the importance of it? Let's read Exodus 4, verse 24. And it came to pass by the way, in the end, that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. And then I always wondered what this meant. So he let him go. Then said she, a bloody husband thou art because of the circumcision. Anybody have any idea what they're talking about? You always wondered, huh? Whose son shall be slain? Let's look at verse 22. But before we get to that, let's read verse 20. It said, Moses took his wife and his sons and set them upon an ass, and he returned to eat to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. When the Lord told him that he must do, in verse 21, it says, when thou goest to return to Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thy hand. But I will harden his heart, and he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, to whom is the Lord speaking in verse 23? To whom? To Moses. And I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. So the Lord is telling Moses to let who go? So when he came to pass by the way in the end that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Kill him who? Moses' first son. How many of you have read this and never understood why those words were there?
I never understood.
So that's why Zipporah took a sharp stone and circumcised him. Here's a question. Was Moses circumcised?
Yes.
He was in his father's house how long? 3 months. At what age are the newborns circumcised? 8 days. So he has been circumcised. So when the daughter of Pharaoh saw the babe in the ark, she said, this is one of the Hebrews. How did she know he was circumcised? Now, here's the question. Why weren't his sons circumcised? Why weren't Moses' sons circumcised? Why didn't Moses circumcise them? 40 years in the wilderness. And notice that the mother circumcised the child. Notice verse 20. Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on an ass. How old were they? They were still young. They had to be under 13 years old for the mother to be able to circumcise. At the age of 14, they're considered adults, and only the father can circumcise. Otherwise, you expose your nakedness. Got it? There's a process here. Why weren't his sons circumcised? Moses had forgotten something. Moses had not thought to return to Egypt. But Moses knew why he had been born. He knew it all along. So when he fled with the intent of never returning, knowing what he had been called to do. What's the difference in Jonah and Moses then? They're called to do something. So here we have, let's go to the book of Genesis chapter 17. We're going to touch all these things for a reason, to get an understanding. Look at Genesis chapter 17. Notice what he says to us. Beginning in verse 4. He says, as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. He's speaking to Abraham. Neither shall thy name be any more called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. So he made him, gave him a name that is equivalent to what he will do, he will accomplish. Okay? says, I will make thee, says, I will make thee exceedingly fruitful and make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee, and to thy seed after thee the land where thou art a stranger, and all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. Notice, you shall keep my covenant, and thy seed after thee in their generations. Now it says, this is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be what? Circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. It says, and it shall be a token of covenant between me and you. First thing, it is a token of covenant. Okay? Then it tells you when it's supposed to be done. He said, he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations that is born in the house or brought with money or of strangers, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house and he that is bought with the money must needs be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for a what? An everlasting covenant. And the circumcised man and the uncircumcised man whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. What had Moses done? So before he sends him back, the covenant needs to be what? Repaired. So, Zipporah, his wife, understood this. But notice, it was under what? A threat of death to who? His firstborn. If you're going to send me to Egypt to take a judgment to Pharaoh, that judgment is also on me. That's why she says, a bloody husband art thou to me. The actual Hebrew word there for husband is bridegroom. A bloody bridegroom thou art to me. Ever wonder what Revelation says, that the bride of the Lamb has made herself ready? Why the Lamb? Sacrifice lamb. A bloody lamb. Why? What was put on the blood on the doors? So see, we're digging a little deeper. Every time we open this up, we're digging into what happened at Passover. Why is Passover so significant? So we're digging a little deeper as we go. So here you have, Moses had broken the covenant of God. He had not circumcised his child. It has to be repaired. How does it get repaired? The bride repairs it. The wife repairs it. Are we not to be the bride? So, as we continue, in Exodus 4:25, when Zipporah took the sharp stone and cut off his foreskin, cast it at his feet. Why his feet? Why did he cast it at Moses' feet? Where is he going? If you're so careful to walk with God, then here, right at your feet, what have you done? You've broken the covenant of God with God. And you want to walk with God? Hard lesson, brethren. Hard lesson here. So here we have, it says, now, in the book of Joshua, chapter 5. Book of Joshua, chapter 5. This is the Israel that comes out of Egypt. In the book of Joshua chapter 5, after they passed over and came out to the sea, after they're going to cross over to this side of Jordan, we begin reading from verse 2. It says, "At that time the Lord said unto Joshua, Make these sharp knives, and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time." Got it? A second time. And then he gives us an explanation. "And Joshua made him sharp knives, circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins." Anybody ever knew there was an actual place called the hill of the foreskins? And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise. All the people that came out of Egypt that were males, even all the men of war, died in the wilderness by the way after they came out of Egypt. Now, all the people that came out were circumcised. But all the people that were born in the wilderness, by the way, as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. So, why were they going to be circumcised? They hadn't been. They were born in the wilderness. Where were the sons of Moses born? He was in the wilderness. So all these that were born in the wilderness had not been circumcised. They were born again. They were born new into Israel. Now you know where the beginning of this you must be born again comes. So, and how are you born again? You must be baptized with what? Water and what? What's the Spirit then? What did Christ tell us the Spirit is? John 6:63. His words, his gospel, his testimony. She must be born of water and what? The testimony of Christ. Oh, so what is the importance of being baptized? What baptizes you then? The water or the testimony?
Doesn't one do it and the other one tells it to everyone?
Well, the testimony is what baptizes you. The water is what cleanses. Why is there a cleansing required? How do you wash away blood? How was the blood washed away in the sanctuary? Water. How did the priest handle the blood? There was a laver outside. They washed their hands and feet when they took the blood in. When they came out, they washed their hands and feet again. Water. Water needed to be in the sanctuary to cleanse all the blood out. All the time. When Christ died, what came out his side when they punctured his side?
Water and blood.
Didn't come out together. So, why was the circumcision not on the sons of Moses? He had broken the covenant. So he was restored, repaired it, before he went back. Why? Why did he have to repair them? They were all going to be in Egypt when the plagues would come. How can Moses go and present himself before Pharaoh as God has prepared him to go? Moses is going to Pharaoh as a god. And he's going to send Aaron, his brother, as a prophet. Exodus 7:1. So how can he send him back when Moses has done something, has not corrected what he was supposed to correct? So when Moses says, "I am of uncircumcised lips," what is he talking about? We're going to cover that tomorrow. So Moses took his sons, his wife, and put them on an ass, and went into Egypt. Who else puts his son and his wife on an ass and goes into Egypt?
Joseph.
Joseph. Why? The angel told him why. They sought to kill him. Well, there was a place called an inn. Actually, it was a place of rest. And Moses was also at a place of rest. So, Moses goes back, takes with him the rod of God in his hand. He returns to bring Israel out of Egypt, as the Lord has said. This includes Israel and Ephraim. Anybody ever wondered why there was such a focus on the fact that the Pharaoh that came up didn't know Joseph? Anybody ever wondered why? Who was protecting Israel in Egypt?
Yes.
Joseph. And when Joseph died, who kept protecting them? Whom did Israel bless? He blessed his two sons, Ephraim first and Manasseh second. The younger is going to serve, the older is going to serve the younger. Guess what? Aaron is older, he's going to serve Moses. Aaron is older, he serves the younger, Moses. Moses is sent back as a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron is sent back as his prophet. So, how are they protected in Egypt all this time? They're protected by the firstborn. That's why when you see Jeremiah 31, let's go to Jeremiah 31. And you have Jeremiah there. 31 verse 9, and we'll read. The actual story starts in Jeremiah 31 to 20, but in Jeremiah 31 verse 9 it says, They shall come with weeping and with supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of water in a straight way. Wherein they shall not stumble, for I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. He's talking about them coming out and being collected again. In chapter 31 of Jeremiah, verse 1 says, At the same time saith the Lord, Will I be the God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus saith the Lord, the people which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness, even Israel, when I went to cause them to rest. It says, The Lord appeared of old unto me, saying, Yea, have I loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness have I drawn thee. Again I will build thee, and thou shalt be built, O Virgin of Israel. Thou shalt again be adorned with thy tabrets, and shalt go forth in the dances of them that make merry. Thou shalt yet plant vines upon the mountains of Samaria, and the planters shall plant and shall eat them as common things. It goes on to explain all this. He's talking about the remnant of Israel that will be contained in verse 7 of Jeremiah 31. But here he mentions in verse 9 that he is the father of Israel and Ephraim is his firstborn. Why? Under Ephraim, Israel was protected. After Joseph died, Israel was protected under Ephraim in Egypt. And eventually, when they all came out, Ephraim also became a very powerful tribe, a leader. And the northern part of the kingdom became Israel, and the southern part of the kingdom became Judah when they decided to, after Solomon passed on, and they rebelled and they separated. Eventually, the northern tribes went into captivity again. So what we have here is how were they protected in Egypt all those years after Joseph had died? Through Ephraim. That's why it says here very simply, it says, For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Again. So when Moses goes back to bring Israel out, he's going to bring them after this time, and he's going to bring out Ephraim as the firstborn. Most people say, wait a minute, wasn't Judah considered? No, Judah was considered what? The scepter. Now that's another story. We're going to cover that too. So when you see exactly how they were actually protected in Israel after Joseph died, you see that it was Ephraim. So there was a reason for Jacob, for Israel, blessing the children of Joseph. He knew the future. He knew what would happen. How did he know? Well, how did Abraham know about Christ? Galatians tells us that the gospel was preached to Abraham. The gospel was preached to Abraham. So if the gospel was preached to Abraham, what was taught to Jacob? So how did Jacob know? What would happen? Remember Moses told Israel, after I'm dead, you're all going to return back and go pervert yourselves. He told them all these things that they were going to do. How did he know? Who told him? Who knows all things? So, Moses returns to Egypt with Aaron, as Exodus 7:1 and 2 says, as a God and as a prophet. Why does Moses say he is of uncircumcised lips in Exodus 6:29 and 30? Why did his wife have to circumcise his firstborn upon threat of death? Was it not his duty to maintain the Lord's covenant upon his own household? What had Moses done for 40 years that he will forget the basic knowledge of the Lord's covenant? He kept the flocks of whom? Jethro. Why? Jacob kept the flocks of Laban for a period of time, knowing that he would return. How do we know that? He made a vow. When he wrestled with the angel, he made a vow. If thou wilt return me to what? To my father's house in peace. He made a vow that he will return tithe, tenth of everything. This is before he went into Laban's house and was there. How many years did he live with Laban? 20 years. How many years did he serve for his two wives? 14 years. So he kept the flocks, but he also came out. Knew he was coming. He knew he was going to return. Did Moses not think he was going to return? He knew. Why didn't he prepare? Even though he knew, even though he didn't want to return, he knew that they had rejected him from the beginning, at the point of death. So he didn't want to return. So when he says, I am of uncircumcised lips, what does it mean? He was a covenant breaker. He knew he had broken covenant. He needed to correct that. Most importantly, he knew that God knew. What do you think he told him? Don't come near it. Take your shoes off. Why? For the ground you are standing is what? And nothing that is not holy or pure can stand in the presence there. So he knew. All this evidence is there before us. How often do we take time to read it carefully, decipher it, understand it? So why is Moses so important? Moses overcame, brethren. He corrected his error. He renewed his covenant with God. And he served the Lord as God had ordained him to do. What's the example for us? We can do the same. We are called to do the same. And that's the central message. We're called to do the same. So, we'll end this here, and if there's be questions, we'll answer them. And tomorrow we'll go to the second part.